And so there are various that we see. So there's like the uncontrolled data, there's the mismatch of tools. Are people being safe with it? Are they adhering to an AI policy or do you not have one? As you can see here from some of these stats, a lot of this is high adoption but poor follow through. And there's a few reasons for that as well. And that's why we created this, to give people an idea of how do you go and probably move away from how most people use this at the moment. So what we want to give you today is a thorough understanding of what AI is and the various ways that it can be used, why you probably need to pay for it, and why you need a policy. And when I say pay for it, I mean the paid version so that you don't give your data away for free. We'll go through that in a bit more detail later on. We'll give you some real life examples that we've seen and done, and hopefully share some learnings with you, and then also leave you with a set of tools and ideas that you can test in your business or team straight away. At the AI landscape, we've probably all heard of these tools. You've got ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, and Gemini. ChatGPT and Claude were the original LLMs that came to fruition and showed us that it was possible to get work done using AI in this way. Now, Copilot and Gemini are kind of business infrastructures who have the models sat on top of your business data. This is where we see a lot of adoption challenges. Is we've got age-old Excels that have been not created for AI, and we also have a lot of data security things where people wouldn't go and search for a specific file, but Copilot can find it if you ask hard enough. Same with Gemini, right? You get connected to G Drive, you've got the efficiencies, but you've also got some of the problems. The main thing to take away from this is that all of these platforms are trying to deliver intelligence, and they want to connect to all of your tools, all of your data at once, that you can access it in different ways. And we'll go through how each of them access your data and how you can change it up between them. There's positives and negatives for each one of these. Broadly, underneath is a couple of examples of what we are going into this in 2026, is this idea of agentic AI. This idea that AIs should have tools, and those tools can be programmed so that they can do more things. So before you would be copying and pasting data, now that can all be automated. What that means is that the usefulness of these platforms has moved from, I can copy and paste an email, to this thing can actually triage emails for me in a customer support role, or I can go and personalize 100 emails specifically because it's searched the web for me. Tools that allow you to build agentic AI, Copilot is doing it, Gemini is doing it, ChatGPT is doing it with custom GPTs and that kind of stuff. But also there are specific platforms like Manus and Agentic, Lindy, which are more programmable, like Zapier's, if you've ever used that. What we're also getting is a spin-off where tools are specifying and going down specific jobs to be done. This is relevant for you because you might not be able to use Claude for a specific thing, but because of how AI development has gone, how open source it is, certain tools such as Arcads, HeyGen, and Synthesia, which are video-based, Claude and Gemini would never get close to, but they're built for a specific job to be done. Arcads is really good at generating UGC content and basically fake TikTok content. There's probably a more refined, specific AI tool for your job role if you haven't found Claude or ChatGPT to be able to use it. And then on the other side, we've got the data connectivity tools like N8N, Pipedream, and Zapier, who are primarily focused on connecting your data to the AI layer. And so we're moving away from really high level of programmability to get something through the door. As a result, there's going to be a lot of trial and error and experimentation that's going to happen at this layer. And then as we go on, some of these tools will be runaway winners because they'll get the adoption. They'll figure out some kind of loop to get adoption. Essentially, we are going from very basic chatbot to tools and connecting data. And then also in the platforms, the kind of SaaS platforms, they're getting hyper specific at the job to be done. And that's also evolving. What you are actually accessing from these models, I'm going to show you the types of models in a workflow in a second. But I also want to make a really clear point right now. You could be sharing all of your sensitive data. Now, I don't know how much you know about data sharing and AI, but essentially they want your data to be able to train their models. They want the most specific and nuanced data so that they can train their models and be better than other models. That's how they make their market share. But when any of your team members are using free versions, you aren't GDPR compliant, your data regulations and practices go out the window because they use that data to train their models. That means that data is being passed over to their servers and it's being used and stored on their side for usage, not just for your typical privacy. One important thing is to make sure you flush out who is using free accounts. That will help you figure out what you need to do. Let me just fire up the workflow quickly. Hopefully you can all see this. The simple step-by-step guide. Each platform has a series of models, and each model has its own type of behavior. Typically, they're split between your general day-to-day workhorse. They've got always a really powerful model that uses a lot of chain of thought, which is step-by-step thinking to make outcomes better. If you've got a math problem, using a bigger model or a more powerful model is going to help you more. Whereas if I'm just writing an email, that email doesn't need a big model, it just needs a workhorse. So you can see here, auto is a function of ChatGPT, just kind of figures out what you need. Instant is very simple examples. So for example, if I'm looking for the weather where I live, I can try what is the weather, and we get the response as expected. Now, if I choose auto, I'm going to fill in a slightly different, harder prompt that requires a little bit of thinking. What's interesting is that when you do auto, sometimes it'll make you refine your general prompt to define what it needs. Sometimes I have a layer of just a quick layer of, let me help refine this with the user. If you've ever used the deep research function, which we'll go through in a second, that also does this type of behavior because it wants to make sure it gets the answer right for you. All of this depends on you getting the answer right, especially if you have to wait quite a while for it to think. Sometimes when I have a bigger problem or a more nuanced problem, I actually use voice dictation on these platforms. I also use a tool called Super Whisper, which is great. It's just one command on my keyboard and I can just speak, and I write code that way. I write emails that way, basically just dictate to the computer, and then I will go and clean it up. It's really useful. I can think quicker than I can type, so I find that useful. You can see here, when I say, okay, going back to the model usage and stuff, when I say, okay, I want to go and research this, please go and do it for me, it's now thinking. You can click on that and see it is choosing a thinking model, applying this thinking. You can see one of the steps on the right is actually using sources as well. That's an example of how they're trying to make the barrier to entry a lot lower. You can rely on something auto-defining because they've trained the models to understand which one to use. Very rarely, unless I'm specifically coding, I won't really go in and change that auto function. ChatGPT can offer people, especially when you pay, because I think a lot of people just still think of it as like a year or two ago. It's like creates an image, gives you an email, but they have started to refine some of the more clear advantages that AI can give, which is they're creating deep research, citing 300 sources and developing a report that otherwise would have taken a team to do. They've also got agent mode, which is really useful because it can log in as you. Obviously, you have some data protection stuff here, but as long as you've paid for it, they will not use any of your data on training. They will just function through your data. I've done it to draft emails, I've done it to research leads, anything that kind of takes 20, 30 goes, but you want the same process over and over again, it's actually really good at that. If you need to find a product, it's just endless things that you will go and click on all the time. Even on LinkedIn, I can connect with a few people if I've set it off to the side, and you can jump in and take control at any time as well. That's really useful. Moving on to Copilot. This is more useful if you're using Office 365 or working specifically with Microsoft products. It's really good at collaborating on internal docs. This is all based on your Purview security setup, based on your SharePoint sharing abilities in your user groups. But essentially, you should be able to access the same files and be able to work with them, refine them all in platform. And again, this is something that, yeah, you can see the prompt that I just used there. Summarize all the files that I need to work on, order and priority. These are the types of things that I would ask an assistant to do that now AI can do because it has access to all the data. It can read the content of the files. Again, with Claude, I am showing you, this is really cool. When we are going through AI and we're saying, right, okay, they're adding tools, functionality, connecting data. Another more advanced version is custom connectors called MCP servers. And basically, you can now talk to it and it can access things such as my to-do list, my Notion, my Gmail, and it can work through all of that. So you can even add Zoho, Books, Canva, and so you can go from, hey, I got this like Gmail, can you please find my to-do list items, add it as a to-do list if I need to, Slack the people I need to Slack, and set up a project in Zoho on Monday, please. And you can do that all within Claude right now. For example, I'm just saying, hey, what tasks do I have on today? And it will get all of them, and use the tools to grab me the answers. I used one the other day. It was just like summarize my week using Todoist, using Gmail, using Calendar, and I got to look at my whole week. It's just so good. Finally, there is the image creation and the API console kind of situation. All these platforms have consoles in the back end. So basically, it's the more technical developer scenario where they're exposing newer models, more custom functionality, but it's also a little bit more grainy. For example, Nano Banana works really well in there, which is where you can edit videos and stuff. We'll go through that in a second. Overall, this is kind of the state of where models are at and the platforms, the general platforms. And so hopefully that was insightful for you to Okay, so we've just gone through what you're actually accessing from the models. So I want to continue with the free versus paid thing. So free, you're going to get worse models. You're not really going to get like tools. You're going to be giving up your data. You are not going to be protected. You're not going to get the best usage. If you have been disinterested or felt like it wasn't up to the hype, there's a good chance you're on a free account and weren't able to get the most out of it. I'd suggest everyone gets at least one paid account, even if you share it with a company, and start to play around with the high limits and the extension of tools. Use the paid tools, the higher limits, able to use the tools, and protect your data as well. It's a step change above the free tier, such that when you use it, you're much more likely to find the value you were looking for. I don't think many people will be dissatisfied when they use a paid account. Free tier users will be constantly dissatisfied, I think. So it's definitely worth having a think about it. Now I'm going to take you through another step-by-step program where we explore the format abilities in AI and how this is also increasing adoption and use, and where we're using it in previous projects. So in Claude, they can create artifacts which can link straight to Google Docs. If you have G Drive integrated, it can also create Microsoft Word docs. Artifacts are built via code or whatever Claude decides to use. You can also edit these, and you can tell Claude that, no, that wasn't what I was looking for. Generally, these are things and assets that you can help you do your job. For example, I am asking it for an artifact that has research capabilities. I need to write an essay while I needed to also have a look at the economy of legal systems. Now, this prompt is poorly written, but I'm asking it to do several creative things. And what's interesting is that it'll start to create what it thinks the assets are to get that job done. You can see it has already done the research. Secondly, it's created the artifact that can write essays but also do calculations. It's super interesting because you can even run code. I did a calculation all in browser. This does beg the question of what's happening to your data, what's the strategy, what's acceptable use, how can you use this in companies? But what's apparent is that the flexibility of being able to get outcomes from AI platforms has changed quite a lot. So it's worth investigating and experimenting with the multimodality, with outputs that otherwise you might not have thought of. It's just really important to get underneath and get testing things. Another example is using Nano Banana. It's a perfect illustration and streamlined workflow of how you can turn something original into something that is a little bit more comical. I've uploaded an image into Nano Banana and given it a prompt. Please put me on a beach, UK Brighton, with a beer. It's warm, sunny People are happy, but a seagull is about to destroy my beer. This is exactly what it looks like. And what you can do with that type of image, I think the accuracy of what it looks like is actually uncanny. And now what we can do is something called Flux, which is Google's VO 3.1. This does beg the question of keeping up to date with models, because it's a combination of new workflows that unlock when models get good enough to handle certain inputs and outputs. Before, creating a video was purely prompt based and the videos were terrible. With images, you could not contain the reference image very well. Whereas you just saw that reference image has become a lot higher quality. And so with new possibilities comes, I guess, new outcomes for people. And you can turn, a photo that you've AI generated, AI edited, or just of yourself, you can upload it to video models now and create your own lovely video. Finally, voice. This is a really, really cool one that I big into. So this is something I'm really excited by. Voice has the shortest span between thought and I want something done. This is why we talk when we mostly have meetings. However, the problem before was that couldn't control enough and wasn't dependable enough. And this is getting less the case, such that customer support agents probably should have a first line where it's a AI agent that has very robust tools, doesn't do too much, but has a triage function. Secondly, out of agents mimicking behaviors using AI, there's also the creative space that it's extremely efficient and easy to generate speech based off of your own voice and custom audio. You can start generating very interesting background noise. For example, some stuff you can play around with if you script an agent or build some audio. It can be cued now, it can add tone changes, it can be directed as if you were asking someone to go and film something for you. And all of this is super interesting. This is a new enterprise value play. How is this a format that we can connect with our customers or prospects? The agents part is the most exciting part in my mind. I had this idea, a bit wacky, a little bit Black Mirror, but I wanted to control my Mac with my voice. It's so much harder than what I thought, but we managed to get it somewhere where it could type a LinkedIn post for me, key by key, and hit post just through my voice. However, you can see, like we talked about earlier, AI is becoming the notion of tools and a model that understands your target goal. Voice sits in this nice thing where it's able to use the bigger models to create logic, but then uses tools to get jobs done. I could speak to an agent, call it, and it will be able to create interactions with certain things. It depends how you program it. These are very specific to that task at hand. I'd have an agent per sort of general role. Like if you have a salesperson, you have qualify a lead, enter the details into the CRM. If you have finance, you have approve budget, enter lines into here, update the report. Essentially, these are micro data moving pieces that if you put together with an agent, you can actually start to do some really interesting work. The way you get agents to interact with the world is you create tools and the snippets of code that the AI agent decides when to use. And finally, coding has completely changed with, I think, the biggest magnitude shift in adoption and improvement of a workflow or a job that I've seen. Nearly every dev that I know that uses it is saying it is improving their workflow massively. And I think we're yet to have that in finance and marketing in the same way. It's just got that output to input coordination that makes a lot of sense. Code is binary, but things like finance, marketing, operations is not. It's psychological and it requires effort and relationship and connection. And these are the things that AI won't be able to touch, in my opinion. I would suggest that people get started with Claude Code and that they learn how to use it, even in the basic sense. There's really great resources out there. We could also help you. There's things that I build for Notion that have a tooling that connects to my Notion and that I can create markdown files and reference files and organize it all in there. Hopefully that's giving you an idea of all the different platforms, multimodal media reference points. Could we use voice in a certain way? Could we use image and video? Could we use the written word and create artifacts for ourselves? One thing to watch out for is that AI is basically predicting the next set of tokens. The problem is that it hasn't learned all of the generic functions and modes of thinking as humans have. It can pretend like it has by producing the right answer because we have quite predictable answers. However, when you exhaust it, prompt it in such a way, when it doesn't have access to that context in its memory, it can trick itself into telling you things that sound okay, but actually are not. Some examples are asking it a really hard math question, it can be confidently wrong. Telling it that you've got something that you've made up and you are persistent that it exists, it can agree with you. And I think this is important for when you're doing validating work, such as research. The worst ones that you've seen are fake sources when you're doing research and not double checking them, which is easy to get around. Just go and verify all the stats that you take out of AI. This happens because it predicts things, it doesn't know things. Always remember that when you are getting an answer from an LLM, Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, it is using a model to predict what you want. And it's very confirmation bias heavy. So it will tell you what you want to hear, not necessarily the truth, not necessarily what you should hear. It is what it thinks most people around the world would want to hear given your question. And this is where memory and context about yourself becomes really, really useful. But I want to kind of stop here and say, I've heard a lot of people say, this doesn't work for us. It won't work for us. There's no way we can get an ROI on this. And I think that is right. A lot of people won't be able to get what they would classify as ROI in AI right now. It is still very premature. However, that doesn't mean that there isn't ROI available if someone experienced has a look at it. ROI might be the wrong lens to look at this sometimes. A lot of the value comes from being able to do things that you hadn't done before. And as a result, you can create new products, you can have conversations with customers in very different ways. When I have looked at a business, even in a small operations department, there are magnitude shifts that can happen in specific processes that, once unlocked, create massive benefits. And for example, one was in operations for a logistics firm. They had a clear automation problem. With AI's advancements, we were able to process documents, check the Outlook every 15 minutes because timeliness was really important for them to fulfill orders. And they were going through this whole process of taking an email, throwing it into Excel, and then throwing it into separate programs, making sure they update the Excel on whether the status was correct or not, and then eventually getting it into a CRM. We managed to pull out all of the threads that were reliable for AI, and now they can do double the work, 3 full-time employees being hired, which was their only other solution at this point. Their current team gets to do 2 times the amount of work, but they're also not doing the manual work. They're doing the client relationship work and making sure that things are more overseeing, which I think is really the theme that I'm getting from a lot of this. Another real world use case that we've done is, or that we actually found accidentally on a workshop, was that we were showing deep research as a new tool in ChatGPT about a year ago. And what it did was we sat down and we just discussed, they're in the ice cream niche. And we said to ChatGPT, hey, go find us some market trends for our specific industry in ice cream. And it asked us some clarifying questions. We just said, look, just go make a decision. Go and find out everything, pull it all in front of me, and I'll use that information. When we showed the team, they said that sales and marketing research team had just got the report together through a manual process for 3 to 6 months, which is super interesting because you're finding results in such a magnitude shift either proves that the insights we used to pay a lot for were actually not worth that much, or that the insights are so accessible that we should be able to rapidly experiment. I think it is the latter. I think research is always super valuable, and everyone could do with a bit more research and data in their business, because we want to use it to infer what experiments we should do, and not just say, oh, that worked previously, but also say, okay, here's where the market seems to be going. What can we do to anticipate what further looks like? It's amazing that one small tool in ChatGPT completely blasted a whole process they spent, I don't know how much budget on, but it was a significant amount of time. Now, another one that we have seen a lot of ability to innovate is finance. Finance seems very clear cut. If Excel's involved, AI is going to have to be involved at some point to allow it to be future proofed. Doesn't mean Excel has to stop being an operating system. We love Excel. Excel is the lifeblood of most businesses. What we're really good at doing is taking the manual part outside of Excel, using AI to categorize data, create new formulas, create calculations, copy data between tabs, and throw it back into the original Excel. If it's in a cloud environment, it's even better if it's in SharePoint, because it stops the whole multiple person file use. We can take hundreds of PDFs and throw them into an Excel within minutes with a 99% validation score. One example is that Meta provides an invoice per creator. We had to itemize all the lines, take the amounts, and summarize and push that into Zero as well. So here isn't like an actual case study that I think is good to take home. Wherever there's a PDF or a document that people take data from and push it into a database or a table such as Excel, that could be a transcript and taking it and pushing it into, Airtable or Monday.com. It could be as high validity as taking a risk assessment and turning it into some type of database or a project management tool. What we did for this Kosh risk assessment company was that they had a SaaS platform, and their users were doing thousands of these transfers of, here's a substance, here's an assessment, iterated on getting the data structure as accurate as possible, and then building a pipeline so that it goes to wherever they need to go. They have full visibility of it now. And the fact that it's 97% accurate shows that AI isn't a perfect thing, but the amount of magnitude shift of work that can be done now is so different, and it means they can do more valuable things. And there's easy tests to see if you can do this yourself, which I'll share at the end. The second case study we've done is sales automation. I love is basically the whole AI is very generalistic, and you can tell when people use AI and it's not their own words. On the flip side, the more valuable things are the things that only you can do. And if you know how to use AI properly, so in sales process, the idea is that the more specific you can get, the better the campaign, the better the assets. So we combine deep research and the agent to do heavy amounts of research on really specific target profiles to build a campaign that had just absolute linear clarity that while we're reaching out to them. We managed to get 600 leads in a couple of hours. Out of those leads, we sent maybe 100 emails manually over 2 weeks. We got 2 positive responses in the total amount of emails that we sent. And I think that was the reason that did so well, was because all the research was automated through AI. But second of all, it's only we could do it. And I think that combination of things is we can automate really nuanced tasks, and it can become something only we can do. That's where a lot of value is underlying, I think, and something that you should go and take away is, what are we not doing because it's just too manual? And then take that and say, can we add this to the marketing stack? Can we add this to the product stack? Can we add this to the customer support stack? This is going over the operations one. We took the APIs, put AI in the middle, and it's done 2,000 orders now, equivalent to 3 months of full-time work for one of the operations teams in the space of 6 months. So I think it's super important to be looking at where there is high changeover. If not, the question becomes, are we not doing something because we think it's manual? Because we think we wouldn't be able to do it? There are a lot of stats that say people using AI are seeing significant gains. I'm one of those people. But there are a lot of people that say they're not getting gains, which I totally understand. I personally believe that there is an opportunity in every company, even just to test it, with no guarantee of return on investment, but we should experiment with this, especially if you're seeing your clients or your industry pick it up and say that there are tools they're using. When you go to experiment with these tools, there's one thing I always talk to every client about, every prospect, every project I have done has had an underlying difficult problem to solve that, if solved, was a magnitude shift. It was a, wow, I can't believe we did that. And the reason you need that, in my opinion, is you always get roadblocks, but you also need to break inertia. You need to break the fear. You need to break whatever is in the way. And there's two ways to do that, which we do both really well. One is we create an environment where failing is okay for a big company like Brabner's, who are very data security heavy, a lot of legals. We remove those restrictions. So you build an environment where you can fail. Just choosing a really hard problem that contributes to your growth plans or is critical to delivering your core service or product. And here's a few examples that you can take away. With all of these, you want to also set a North Star metric that proves whether it's going well or not. And keep it extremely simple. The idea that AI has to be complicated is a farce, and we don't believe that that's true. If the plumbing is complicated, who cares? The job should be simple, and it should be simple to know whether it's going well or not. So the two tools I would suggest going and playing around with is ChatGPT or Claude Pro. We understand why we should be doing that now. Figure out what kind of prompts you should be doing and try and connect a few tools, see how that can work. And if you're feeling more adventurous, learn how to create a voice agent, talk with it first, and then add some tools and see if it can read your Gmails. I think those two examples are super cool. They get you learning, they get you testing, they get you seeing where it falls down. And again, this should be a budget of experimentation. If you find a thread where content can be much quicker to create, refining a document, taking data out of one and pushing it to another system, this can all be done with these two platforms at a very basic level, and plumbing it together could be an opportunity for an engineer. Here is the reasons that might not go to plan. You've got technical reality, business challenges, and you've also got like the human factor as well. But there's some stats in here that hopefully can give you an idea of where that's coming from. Basically, it's hard to get AI to do the things you want without a technical background at scale. That requires plumbing, which is where we come in. That is probably the hardest thing to get around, the human factor. Business challenges, businesses aren't ready for the magnitude shifts that exist. Pricing has to be updated, teams have to be updated, the market has to be ready. It's moving so fast that a lot of people are just abandoning it and thinking, I'll just keep riding my luck. That doesn't typically go too well, but it's a lot more accessible. It's about creating that environment. The last one about the human factor, this one I bump into, but it is always underlying. No one wants to admit that they're scared. However, everyone is scared. I'm scared. I write code and I'm like, what am I really doing? So that's a really interesting one. What do I want you to take away? There's four main things. Get a subscription, pay for it, £20 a month, few people in the company, get them to add some tools, try it out. Second one is create an AI policy, which is acceptable use. We're actually offering a free AI policy creation. If you want to talk to us about that, more than happy to. Tell your team how AI is supposed to be used and how to protect against misuse. Third one is train your team. I think training is best with that experimentation thing in mind, where we're not trying to get ROI straight away. We're trying to find out learnings, apply some budget, go and read some blogs, some newsletters, and some YouTube videos, and learn how to solve that specific problem with AI, not just learn about AI in general. You need a core focus to dig deep and empower your team as well. We want to make sure that people are incentivized to almost see if their job is a risk, see if they can actually compete with these AI tools, and if not, how do they implement them, and then move their experience, intelligence, hard work, and grit to things that might happen in the future or things they currently would like to do. I think that your policy should cover what data is shared, what data isn't, what's out of bounds, how do we edit AI outcomes, in what situations do we say that we do use AI. Loads of different scenarios. It's specific to each company. It depends how you use client data or prospect data or customer data, whether you've got free or paid accounts. Generally, though, free versions don't put anything dodgy in there. If something would break your business or a client relationship, don't put that in there. You can key change certain data to make sure that it is compliant with your clients as well. You can change their company name, you can change certain values of the data. The LLM, the ChatGPT, the Claude will not care. Like I said earlier, we are offering a 60-second form that turns some basic information that you can give us in 60 seconds into a customized AI policy that is able for you to go and take away for free, just to show that we are able to help people in their specific scenario with adopting AI. This seems to be a big first blocker that we can help with quickly on our side. Pick one repetitive task, use one of the tools, and document changes and benefits. Set up the subscriptions, get the AI policy in place, and brief your team on what you're changing and what we should be doing. You can always ask us about how a specific department can make it work, how to scale what's working, and any custom implementation questions. The question is, how do you go and test this thing? How do you get help when you need it? It's been an absolute pleasure. I've been David from Assimilate, the head of AI. If you do have any questions, please follow up with us. You can book a triage call where you get a free diagnostic of any problem you've got in AI. Otherwise, go and get a free AI policy from us. I'd love to see you in there.